Now, we have a full house here. We have a very big crowd, like Yankee Stadium. Joining me to talk about this, Liz Peek, syndicated columnist, Fox News contributor, Mark Simone, WOR Radio host, and Joe Concha, media and politics columnist at The Messenger, Fox News contributor, and author of Come On, Man. All right, as I survey this group, I'm going to go to Joe Concha first.
Okay.
First of all, I thought my riff was fair. I think it was accurate. Did you see the Trey Gowdy interview?
Watch the whole thing. Yeah.
All right. What did you think?
I thought he came across as likable. He smiled throughout it. And he was very issues-based, which is what he has to be here. Don't try to win a personal war with Donald Trump and get in the mud. Ask Ted Cruz, ask Marco Rubio how that went when they went down that route. And he's got a story to tell. You got unemployment in Florida at 2.5%. That's about half of what it is in California, for example. Crime is at a 50-year low in Florida. We know what he's done on the education front. But most importantly, more people are migrating to Florida than any other state. And they're going from the New Yorks and the Californias of the world. And don't tell me, by the way, it's about climate and coastline, because last check, California has that too, and people are leaving in droves at this point.
I understand. That's a good point. I don't understand, though. I'm going to get to everybody. We have plenty of time on this. He has this great story to tell, Florida versus New York. We've told it on this show. I've written editorials about it. But he didn't quite get that in.
About the budget, you mean?
Well, it's about the budget and it's about taxes. I mean, the classic one, this comes from originally a Wall Street Journal editorial. I mean, this will play right into DeSantis' If you live in New York, your personal income tax is 14.8%, New York City, all right? 14.8% tax. That's not including federal. If you live in Miami, it is 0.0. Florida is bigger than New York, has only half the budget, and Florida's economy in the last, 6 or 8 years has grown 3 times New York. Now, that may not all be DeSantis. There were Republicans that came before him, but still, if I were he, I would use that. Now, Mark Simone may disagree. I don't know how this is going to work out.
Slightly. But
I'm just saying, in other words, that's the kind of, if I spoke to him, I'd say, look, you want to put your speech, put that in your speech. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Mark?
Go ahead, Mark. You're on.
A lot of what you love about Florida, the no taxes, all that, he inherited. He's a great governor. He's done a wonderful job. But that was the most botched announcement ever. It didn't start for a half hour. I'm listening to on-hold music. I thought I was calling the cable company. It's audio only. That's like radio. The last person to announce on radio was Herbert Hoover. I didn't understand the point of that. He set an all-time record for the lowest amount of people ever on an Elon Musk tweet. Musk gets 20 million a tweet. This was about 600,000. It averaged about 300,000.
Dropped down to 300.
Dropped way down. Listen, he's a great governor. There's no question about that. But that's different from running the entire free world, running the American economy. He's a young guy. He's 42. A few years from now, maybe. I don't know if he's big enough for this. He's a great regional manager. I don't know if he's a chairman of the board.
Chairman of the board, Liz Peek?
No, I think he's much more than that. He's an incredibly good candidate. I mean, he's went to Yale, worked his way through Yale as captain of the baseball team. You don't get to do that unless you're pretty popular. So, Harvard Law School. The guy is incredibly smart. He's a veteran. He has all that you need to be an incredibly winning candidate. Look, everyone is piling on Ron DeSantis. Why do we think that is? Guess what, folks? He is the guy that can beat Joe Biden. I have serious doubts that Donald Trump can beat Joe Biden. Look, if it happens, if he runs, if he's the candidate, I sure as heck hope he does, because, boy, are we in trouble in this country. We need a Republican president to win. So whoever it is who has the chops to get out there and win, that's who I'm going to be for.
Do you think I piled on in my riff?
No, not at all. But I'll tell you what.
I thought my riff was very even-handed.
I mean, Politico ran a horrible piece about Casey DeSantis, how she's, quoting Roger Stone, comparing her to Lady Macbeth. Roger Stone? Politico
she's
goes to Roger.
She's a cancer survivor, by the way.
I mean, yeah, she's a wonderfully beautiful, great girl.
But I thought I was even-handed. That's all.
No, I thought you were.
You're obsessed.
Larry, this is not all about you. Yes, you were even-handed.
No, it's just very important that we establish this.
But I'm saying it is amazing to me. All the Trump people, of course, are piling on Ron DeSantis because they're all scared to death he'll be the candidate. Democrats are terrified he'll be the candidate because he can win. And one reason he can win, look at his favorables. He has actual positive favorables. Nobody has positive favorables. And a good portion of the electorate still doesn't know much about him, 14%.
By the way, you know who has great positive favorables, plus 10? I'm serious now. Kevin McCarthy.
Well, that's amazing.
Kevin McCarthy.
Because
is the
Congress
only
never does.
guy in Washington, D.C. I've said this a couple times on the show. It's just interesting to me. And the reason I want to emphasize that is that Kevin McCarthy talks nonstop. Now, I know you're in the budget debate and the debt ceiling, but Kevin McCarthy is so on message about spending and growth and inflation and balanced budgets and eventually getting the Trump tax cuts. I'm just saying how, Joe, my point on McCarthy, now I know you have another point.
Sure.
I just want to emphasize this because I think it's a winning message. In other words, what Laura Ingraham said on her show last night, that's how Reagan overturned Carter. That's how Clinton overturned Papa Bush. He took advantage of a terrible economy in both cases. This is, at the moment, a very poor, weak economy with high inflation, and I think the odds of recession are quite substantial. Next year is going to be a pocketbook election. Whether it's DeSantis or Trump, I don't think, and I give them all an incomplete right now.
I agree with you.
I liked some of the things. As I said, I think DeSantis is spot on energy, spot on the Fed. I love what he said about the Fed. My heart was all pitter-patter. He needs more on taxes. In other words, he needs to talk the language of growth. Right. He's not doing that yet. And Trump is a little better at it. But I acknowledge he's got to turn over a new leaf on spending and a balanced budget and entitlements, those sorts of things. He's going to have to deal with that. Anyway, your point.
Before COVID, Trump presided over one of the best economies we had seen,
yes,
right, since Reagan. So if DeSantis goes after Trump on economy, I think they kind of split. It's a wash.
No, but he has to establish his bona fides.
Yes.
He has to establish his bona fide. Mm-hmm. So he should run against Biden.
He should
run against Biden.
That
would
would be
where
smart.
you're going.
Of course. But here's the thing. People say, well, Trump has this insurmountable lead, and you look at the national numbers, and it does look insurmountable. I look at Iowa, because that is the most important state for Ron DeSantis right now. He has twice the money that Donald Trump has in his war chest, and he's going to go on a ground game like we've never seen in that state from a GOP candidate before. Real Clear Politics average. Trump 40, DeSantis 28 before he declared in Iowa. That's striking distance. Mm-hmm. If he could win there, and then you look at the fact that 70% of the American people don't want Joe Biden to run, including a majority of Democrats. 60% don't want Donald Trump to run, including 44% of Republicans. So why are we being told over and over that it is inevitable that we're going to have Trump-Biden when so many people do not want this rematch? I'm not saying Trump isn't the favorite. He is. But DeSantis has a puncher's chance here, and I think this is going to go.
Don't look at me. I work at Fox. I just want to establish that.
Yes.
I was proud to serve in the Trump cabinet, by the way. Absolutely, totally proud. And I happen to love the guy, but he's got work to do.
He does.
And DeSantis, I was very impressed with DeSantis last night on Trade. The Twitter thing was a fiasco. He never should have done that.
Should have done a rally.
That's right. But, in Florida with thousands of people.
Can I just interrupt 1 second, though? All right, so Trump did a rally. There were 15,000 people there, right? Joe Biden does his launch on YouTube or something and gets 40,000. So maybe 300,000 or 400,000 isn't exactly what Elon Musk usually gets. It's a lot of people listening in.
Did Biden? I thought it was just like a video.
It was a video.
That's what I'm saying. But I mean, it was out there and it got no response whatsoever.
Yeah, I would, with good reason. Mark,
300,000 is not a good number. We're talking to more people than that right here, right now.
Actually, that is true.
Yeah, a lot more people.
Yeah.
And he did on Trey Gowdy's show, too.
He should have done a big rally in Florida and flown right to Iowa and should be doing a rally there tonight
right.
and then New Hampshire
You're
one tomorrow.
dead right.
Get in front of people and show that you can attract a big crowd. That you're a big player.
But you have to remember, it's a very long list of people that have won Iowa and then lost the nomination.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a long
Ted
list.
Cruz beat Trump in 2016.
Buttigieg, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
so...
But by the way...
But hang on. I want to... Tell me why you think Governor DeSantis is a regional, or whatever you said, regional type manager and not ready for the big stage.
Well, an important part would be foreign policy. He's not good on foreign policy. He had to walk back what he said about Ukraine. He bumbled that. Foreign policy is a lot about negotiating with Kim Jong-un, with Putin. When DeSantis has a beef with Disney, rather than meet them and negotiate and calm it down, he escalates it into total chaos. So you can't run foreign policy like that.
The Disney story has hurt DeSantis.
Yeah, I think it's gone too long, too far.
On twofold, Liz, though. Look, I've always said he won the legislative battle, okay? Up to the third grade, you're not going to have what he calls the sexualization of children and so forth. So he won that. But then he had to really stomp all over them, and now he's involved in messy lawsuits.
Yeah, stupid.
People are saying, as Mark has said, why didn't you go in and make a deal and wash your hands of it? And, Bob Iger's a smart guy, and he said, I'm not going to say anything more about state politics. I mean, I think that's a judgment call. Now, the question is, do you learn from that? I don't know.
I would say, in general, going back to your initial opening remarks, he is spending too much time.
Which were even-handed, weren't they?
Yes, very
I just want to establish that.
Those even-handed opening remarks. I would say he has spent too much time on woke issues, not enough on the economy. I disagree with you. I think if you've been a governor of a big state and run it well, he ran the hurricane well, which I know it sounds like a weird thing to do, but anyway, he was very good at managing the recovery from the hurricane. I think what he has to do, though, is make people understand that the policies that work in Florida in terms of the economy can also work nationwide.
So tell us, you're now his chief economic advisor. Go ahead, give him a briefing.
Well, you go to Iowa. I think you're totally right. And you talk about how you're going to make the country prosperous again. Because, yes, we're going to go into a recession. They're going to be campaigning during a recession. Chances are the jobs market's going to get weaker, and inflation probably is going to continue to be a plague. So I think he's got a very strong message, lighter regulation, because one of the big untold stories of the Biden administration, all the tsunami of regulations going out into business, stifling investment, which no one's talking about, and it's just as bad as under
Not
Obama.
just energy, it's all business.
Yeah, absolutely. All kinds of things.
And Biden never misses a chance to attack business.
Oh, yeah, and the FTC
chance.
is a good example.
Yes.
Out of control FTC. Anyway, there's a lot going on that I think is bad.
Joe, is Ron DeSantis a good communicator? On the stage, I guess the first debate is in Milwaukee sometime in August. On the stage, how will he do with Trump? Now, I know there are others in the race. They're friends of ours. I don't mean to downplay them. But, those two guys are going to be the two big men on the stage.
Yes.
How will he do? Can he stand up to Trump? And how, in general, you're a communications professional. How are his communication skills right now?
Let me be as even-handed as possible with this answer. The question, I'm going to answer your question with a question. I know, I cannot.
It's not possible.
I'm going to answer your question with a question. The question is, will Donald Trump be on that stage? Because he has said at this point, he's not taking part in this, that he shouldn't have to because his lead is so big that it should be a coronation and not a nomination.
Mark, will Donald Trump be on that stage?
He'll be on one of those stages, maybe not the first one, but he'll be on one of them. DeSantis is a weak debater. Go back and watch his gubernatorial debates. He's not strong.
If he's so weak, then why won't Trump show up?
So you're right. So I'll go back to Joe. Joe, if Trump is on the stage,
yes,
what happens?
I think DeSantis sticks to policy, and I think Trump goes to the name calling, and I think Trump will lose the gravitas. If DeSantis could show gravitas, stick to issues, and be as articulate as he was last night with Trey Gowdy, he'll win that debate.
Trump should call Jeb, Scott Walker, John Kasich, find out what happened to them in a debate.
Jeb's for DeSantis, isn't he?
Oh, he's got the Bush crowd. That co-host last night on the Twitter was a big Hillary donor.
Yep.
This is Jeb, too, the revenge of the swamp.
I think he's a much better candidate than Jeb.
He's a conservative.
All right, so I'm going to ask one last question. We're going to go around. Akil wants us to get out. We've already spent a heck of a lot. This is the longest segment in history.
That's great.
Liz Peek, did Governor DeSantis win or lose on the announcement speech?
Well, I hate to say it.
Writ large, I'm going to include the Trey Gowdy part as well as the Twitter fiasco.
Well, unfortunately, all people are talking about is the Twitter fiasco. So I think it was a loss. I think he recovers.
Mark?
The Twitter thing was a disaster. Even Joe Biden put out a tweet making fun of it. When Joe Biden is laughing,
he said, what did he say? My link works?
Yeah.
That was actually very funny. I'm sure he didn't think of it, but that was actually
Biden is
very
making
funny.
fun of his gaffes. That's pretty bad.
It stepped on the news cycle. It'll be forgotten in 3 days. We're still 256 days to Iowa. We're still 3 months from the debates. This will be forgotten in a hurry.
I like a man with numbers.
Thank you.
Yeah, really.
Liz Peek, Mark Simone, Joe Concert.
Thank you.
Kids. You're all
Bye.
terrific
Thank you.
stuff. Even-handed.
Even-handed.
Even-handed,
Really?
yeah.
That's what comes out of this.